So whatever you want to do, be or have, we need to measure before we write. Okay, it's important. By the way, if you have any questions about any of this, just write them down and we'll deal with them as they come. So before you write, think about this. In all of those things, what you want to do, be or have, there should be a 3-part measuring stick before you write. Part 1 is, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again, it absolutely must be measurable. An example of something that's not measurable would be what? World peace. Peace on earth. I want to have a business. That's definitely not measurable. I want to one day be this. I'm finding it actually hard to come up with examples because I don't think like that. It's very hard for me to go to think in non-measurable things. Let me try to put myself back. Oh, I know. I want to be a jazz musician. That's not measurable. What does that even mean? What kind of jazz musician? In what context? On what instrument? Where? For who? Do you want to get paid? Do you want to do it for free? Which a lot of them do. None of that's measurable. So you have to pick something that's measurable. So to me, if you would say, well, I want to be a jazz musician, which is the answer I gave my wife when we first were married, boy, was I just not with it. When I look back on my life, it's like I'm grateful for going through those lessons, and some of them are really hard to learn, but non-measurable goals are very painful, just FYI. If you look at your current situation, you have to look at the destination, and that destination must be measurable in terms of distance or amount or weight or even stature. There has to be a measuring stick for it. So if you take jazz and you said, well, I want to be a jazz musician, there's nothing to measure there. A jazz musician who is an international recording artist and touring professional who earns a minimum of $150,000 a year. That's measurable. You following what I'm saying? So when you write on this paper, if you say, I want to run a business, that's not the answer I'm looking for. I'm looking for, I want to start a dry cleaning business with 3 locations and each location earning $250,000 a year in revenue. To me, that's measurable. 2, it absolutely, and this is important, must be risky. That's where this part comes in. Right here. Goal squared. That's the risk that all people who are entrepreneurial take. Yes, for every risk that you choose, there's a potential reward, but at the same time, there's also a potential disaster in the making. The disaster in the making, by the way, is usually made up in your own head. It's usually fictitious. The difference between faith and fear is I have faith that I'm only going to make mistakes once, because if I make them twice, that's when they become mistakes. The first time they're just learning opportunities. That's, faith is believing in things even when common sense tells you not to. Love that. By the way, that's from White Christmas. Faith is believing things when common sense tells you not to. I love that. Fear, on the other hand, typically tends to be mind-generated. And to me, fear, if you want to know what I think the definition of fear is, And I know that a lot of people, if you look online for the definition of fear, people will say this: false evidence appearing real. It's okay if you want to look at it like that, false evidence appearing real. I don't know. I just think it's not that. It doesn't feel right. Here's what I think fear is. Fear is the anticipation of something. So the projecting of our mind into the future, anticipating what? Pain. Because pain is not just physical, it's also very emotional. So when we fail at something, people feel like failures. That's pain. So fear to me is the anticipation of pain, the projecting into the future that this isn't going to work out so well. So rather than do that and be disappointed and be pained or becoming painful and full of pain, people set the bar low because they just want to avoid all of that. And so if you set the bar low, you won't have pain, but you still won't reach your destination. So it's a little sidetrack on fear there. So 1, measure. 2, risk. Very important. Set the bar higher than you're used to. You've heard the expression, if I shoot for the stars, at least I'm going to hit the moon. That's sort of what I'm talking about. And then 3, I think, is equally as important as the first 2. So when you write something on the True Heart's Desire intensity scale, 3 is give yourself a time limitation. When are you going to reach that destination? When I set out on the Camino de Santiago in the spring of 2004, I had no idea what I was up against. I do know this: I was injured. And the 3 doctors, my family doctor, and an expert, what do they call bone doctors? Orthopedic surgeon, and a holistic doctor, who I never forget those people because they tend to work on wellness versus symptoms. I think wellness it's deeper than symptoms. It's like drugs mask symptoms. Wellness cures from the core. So all 3 of those people said this 1 week before I'm supposed to walk literally 850 kilometers, and I walked further than that, but originally the goal was 850 kilometers. They all said, you cannot go. You can't walk to the corner. What makes you think you can walk across Spain starting out in the mountains with 50 pounds on your back? They're like, you can't go, and you can't go. There's only one problem with that. I already bought a ticket, and the ticket, of course, poor people buy non-refundable tickets, and I had a non-refundable ticket. So I went anyway. And the reason why I went was because I figured, what's the worst that could happen? And often when I think about goals, I also think about, well, what's the worst? I'm not a person that thinks is focused on bad things happening. There's a saying called Murphy's Law. Do you know what Murphy's Law says? What can go wrong will go wrong. That's made up by a bunch of people who believe that. And if you believe that, that's what you will see. If you believe that bad news comes in 3s, guess what? Bad news comes in 3s. That's just that your belief system becomes your reality. So for me, what's the worst that could happen? I start walking, and by the way, I had a walking stick, a cane, if you will. And I knew that if I can't even make it a kilometer, what will I do? Well, I'm in Spain. I've got 2 months. That's the original limitation. I've got 2 months to walk across Spain. I'm going to need a little more time than most people because I can barely walk. I had injured my knee quite badly, and it's a chronic injury, and I had re-injured it on a skiing hill. It was all bandaged up and taped up, and it had one of those braces on it. I looked like a veritable, bionic machine. But I started walking on the Camino de Santiago, and in the first leg of the journey, for most people, takes 7 to 8 hours, okay? Of consistent walking, uphill, downhill, whatever. It's in the Pyrenees Mountains, halfway between France and Spain. A place called Roncesvalles. As I started out walking, I can tell you that I was not fast. In fact, I walked pretty much like this. And I had a stick. And I would plant the stick, left foot, keeping weight off my left knee. So it took most people 7 to 8 hours, somewhere between 17 and 18 hours to make it to where most people had gone in 7 to 8 hours. That night, I couldn't stay at the Refugio, it was full, because this is the most, this is where most people start. Only 20% of the people finish. Bunch of reasons for that: injuries, blisters, it's too hard, people have to leave, they don't have enough time. Bunch of reasons why people don't finish. But at the beginning, it's the most busy part, and at the end, it's the most busy part. That's where the tourists go. They go to the end, and the beginning as well. So as you're starting out, if you're on the Camino de Santiago, you can stay at a Refugio for like a donation or €7 a night in a large room with a bunch of bunk beds. I couldn't even get into that because I was so late that it was full. So I had to walk another kilometer or so that somebody told me to go, and I did find a place to stay. It was also full, but there was a lady there that came up to me, and she just said, "I'm a Reiki master." And I'm like, "Oh, I've never met a Reiki master before. I know what that is, but I've actually never met one. How long have you been a Reiki master?" She said, "As long as I can remember." And she was in her 50s, easily in her 50s, also walking the Camino de Santiago. And I said, "Well, thanks for sharing. Can I help you with anything else?" She goes, "Well, I saw that you're pretty badly hurt and injured. Do you mind if I do some Reiki on you?" And I'm like, "I don't have any money. Like, I can't really pay." She goes, "Oh, no, I don't want any money. I just want to help you." And I'm like, what's the worst that could happen, right? She prays for me and she heals me. I don't know if she can heal me. I have no idea. All I know is that my knee is the size of Mount Rushmore, and it hurts badly, and as I go to sleep at night and I try to get up in the morning, it's probably not going to work so well. So I agree. She makes me lie down. We find a place by ourselves. And for the next half hour, she just does Reiki, mostly on my knee. I stood up after that, and I didn't feel any pain, which I thought was odd, because I felt a lot of pain before I laid down, and I didn't feel much after standing up. But I thought, oh, that's just because I've been resting it, so it's not so bad. I went to bed fully expecting to get up in the morning and not being able to walk at all. And I was on the top bunk because that was all that was left. And I gingerly made my way off the top bunk in the morning, and I put some weight on my foot, like this. And I went, not any worse than yesterday. I grabbed my gear, got my stuff on, got my backpack on, headed out the door. And it was, like I said, it wasn't any worse, and the pain was actually less. Interestingly enough, 3 days later, 3, not 30, not 36, not 3 minutes, but 3 days, I was 100%. How many doctors told me that I couldn't do this? 3 of them told me I couldn't do this. And yet, in 3 days, I'm completely healed. I think often when we pick goals, we take ourselves out of the game because of the fear of consequences. That's the perfect example of a journey that is absolutely measurable. It's like literally like 1,000,000 steps, 850 kilometers. 2, for me, it was completely risky because everyone, or at least people that had the experience of, doctoring, told me not to. So there's an inherent risk. And 3, I had only 2 months to do it. And then most people will say, well, why would you do that anyway? And the answer is because I didn't know how to answer this first question. What is it you want to do, be, or have in your life that you don't have right now? And I couldn't answer that question. To me, that seminar in Montreal was just the shot in the arm that I needed to go walk about and figure out what it is I wanted to do. What is it I really wanted to do? I had an inkling of what I wanted to do, but I didn't know. And so I needed some time to go and figure that out. Are there any questions about this? Because clarity is power, and I want to make sure that if you're going to do this exercise, that you're going to do it with this measuring stick in mind, this clarity in mind.